IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Amit Kumar, your host for today, a research analyst with the institution's Indo-Pacific Studies program. And today I am joined by my colleague from the program, Anushka Saxena, also a research analyst with the program. So today we'll be discussing an aspect of China in our neighborhood. So very recently, alarm bells went out when media broke the news that yet another Chinese research ship was on its way to the Indian Ocean, more specifically Malé. And to discuss this more about this, I have Anushka with me. So, Anushka, could you tell us about, give a little bit of background about this Chinese research vessel that is on its way and about to make a port call in Malé? Can you brief us, just give a background to this research vessel?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amit. Firstly, happy to be here and interacting with our listeners about this. I think why this is such a matter of concern and why this topic is making the rounds in the news is because this survey ship or how the Chinese like to call it, a comprehensive research and survey vessel is about to make a port call or dock in Malé, Maldives. And even though we don't know the exact date of when it's going to dock in the country, this research vessel has done multiple other rounds in the Indian Ocean region, collecting oceanographic and hydrological data, trying to understand aspects of the seas in the Indian Ocean region, such as the amount of chlorophyll, oxygen levels, life forms, so on and so forth. And this is, I think, a 4,300-ton ship, and it's developed by the Shenyang Institute of Automation under the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Like I said, it's part of a series of such survey vessels that have previously made the rounds in the Indian Ocean region. This series is called the Xiang Yang Hong series. And of course, there's the 1, 2, and this is the third one that's supposedly expected to dock at Maldives. There is also other vessels in the Xiang Yang Hong series going up to number 06. And like I said, the purpose of these vessels is to do comprehensive mapping of the Indian Ocean region, and whatever data is collected is then processed by developers like the Chinese Academy of Sciences or even the Qingdao Maritime Laboratory for Scientific Marine Scientific Research, which is QNLM, and then this data is processed and visualized for potential civilian applications in maritime science and technology. And of course, as I briefly alluded to earlier, and we can get into this further in the discussion, data visualization and processing of course also has applications for naval defense. So I think that's the background we need about the vessel and its operations.
Yeah, thanks, Anushka. So seems like this is a very normal procedure or a normal exercise that any country would take in order to better understand ocean and seas. But still, there's something which is very spooky about the Chinese research vessels, especially the one which is about to port in Malé is Xiang Yang Hong 03. Could you tell us actually why is there a need for India to be concerned about the Chinese research vessel docking in Malé? I mean, this is not the first instance when India. I mean, this time India has not yet protested, but there have been instances in the past wherein these Chinese research vessels earlier made a port call in Sri Lanka, and for which became a big issue, and India also protested. And there was also a time when India actually asked one of the Chinese research vessel to leave its economic exclusive economic zone. Is there something that India? Is there a reason why India needs to be worried about these Chinese research vessels making constant presence in the Indian Ocean, larger Indian Ocean region, but more specifically in the Arabian Sea or the Bay of Bengal?
Right. So I think that is indeed the question of the hour, and it's not even about whether India should be worried, or what are the possible sources of worry for India. It is that India is worried, and like you said, that's amply evident from the fact that India has protested in the past um, against such Chinese research and survey vessels docking in Sri Lanka, which is, it shares a close maritime border with India. And also, I think the event that you're referring to, when the Indian Coast Guard, the Indian Navy, excuse me, drove out one of the Chinese vessels from its EEZ, was in September 2019, when Xian-1, which is another Chinese comprehensive research vessel, was caught operating without authorization in India's exclusive economic zone, just off of the coast of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, very close to Port Blair. And this move to drive the ship out, it was undertaken in line with some of the provisions of international law, more specifically Article 246 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, which prohibits any country from conducting marine scientific research in the EEZ of another coastal state without consent. And such consent, as I alluded to earlier, was not obtained with relevant Indian authorities. And so I think that's point one of why Chinese vessels are a cause of concern, not just for India, but other coastal states.
Yeah, so clearly the Chinese research vessels have been notorious while operating in the seas, in the high seas, right? And that is something that has concerned not just India, but a lot of other countries, including Indonesia. I remember 2 years ago, an Indonesian Coast Guard protested against the same Chinese research vessel that is about to make a port call in Malé for entering their exclusive economic zone and then turning off their transponder, which gives us, that current position or live position to the servers. So there has been something very notorious about, and notorious in how these Chinese research vessels have the history, the kind of history that they have in terms of operations. So do I mean, is this just the notoriety of these Chinese research vessels that are a cause of concern, or are there any military implications as well, which might be of concern to other countries, including India?
Yeah, so I think just to quickly catch on to one of the points you made about Indonesia, which is also my point too, as to why these vessels are a cause of concern. In addition to the fact that they regularly conduct marine scientific research without authorization from coastal states, and therefore do not abide by relevant international legal frameworks. The second point is that they have a history of going dark, and
Right.
what happened 3 years ago in January 2021, when the Indonesian Coast Guard caught one of the vessels of the Xiang Yang Hong series operating in Indonesia's EEZ, was that the vessel had turned off its transponders, which are part of this system that is embedded within these survey ships, which is the AIS, or the Automated Information System, which helps nation states in the littoral area to recognize and identify a ship based on the signal that they receive pinging off of their transponders. And in naval lingo, so to say, this is referred to as a ship going dark, because then none of the littoral states can get an information about its uh, location or its activities, and how this links to your question about military activities.
Yeah,
uh,
I'll come to that, but yeah. So there have been n- news and accusations that these research vessels have deep relationship and connections with the military. Could you enlighten us on that aspect of the issue?
right. So just individually on the aspect of military affiliations, I think, yes, that would be one of the first things to look at, while understanding where these vessels come from and what their mandate of research and operation is. So, like I said, these are vessels that are um, originally and by name oriented towards collecting research data that is capable of aiding civilian scientific research and understanding maritime oceanography, and even aiding with goals pertaining to the international climate change efforts. But at the same time, if we look at the Xi'an series or the Xiang Yang Hong series of comprehensive survey and research vessels from China, it is very important to, like you said, note their military affiliations and the affiliations of the institutions in charge of not only building these vessels but also supervising their operations. So, for example, the Chinese Academy of Sciences and its Shenyang Institute of Automation, right, which has not only um, contributed on the sea voyage trials of the Xiang Yang Hong series, but has also developed some of the unmanned underwater vehicles that are deployed as part of these survey ships to conduct similar oceanographic research. This research center, SIA, has actually engaged deeply with building military equipment, and has been awarded a contract sometime in 2020 to develop intelligent self-flying machinery for the People's Liberation Army Air Force, and it's also a part of a classified project. It's actually leading this classified project, which is referred to by some in the defense and intelligence industry as Project 912, and this is to develop military underwater robots, right? And in 2022, I think a couple years ago, the Shenyang Institute of Automation was also added to the US entity list, the entity list maintained by the US Department of Commerce and
Right.
Department of State, which basically looks at companies, Russian, Chinese, mostly others that have some miscreant kind of ambitions from the US's foreign policy and security goals,
Right.
obviously. And so SIA was added to this entity list for quote unquote attempting to acquire American origin items in support of military applications. And so this obviously runs contrary to the civilian nature of the work that they put forward on, say, their website and other media reports. Then similarly, I talked about the Qingdao Pilot National Lab for Marine Science and Technology Research, which is QNLM. It has been deeply involved in, again, sea voyages of the Xiang Yang Hong 3. It has also collaborated with the PLA on various naval defense projects. And moreover, if we look at the governing board of QNLM, it has about 16 entities. Eight or nine of them are ministries of finance, natural resources, so on and so forth. So usual governmental entities involved and invested in scientific research, but also seven or eight entities from the military industrial complex and defense universities of the PLA, like the China State Shipbuilding Corporation and the Qingdao Ocean University. Both of them are key pillars of China's military civil fusion strategy. They've regularly contributed to the PLA Navy's force building work, with the China State Shipbuilding Corporation even building naval warships
Mhm.
for the PLA, and the Qingdao Ocean University conducting research work for the PLA with even secret credentials. So these and these entities are all on the governing board of the QNLM, which is again directly connected with the operations of the Xiang Yang Hong and dictates how what it does, what's the research used for, so on and so forth. So these this is the lay of the land of the military affiliations, and it obviously tells us that these comprehensive research and survey ships are capable of much more dual use nature of research collection than perhaps what they put on.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and that the fact that these data are in open makes it no secret that they have deep interlinkages with the military services, these research civilian research ships, or the members sitting on the governing body of the entities that own these ship have such a deep interlinkages with the military. And this brings the sentence that you ended with brings me to my next question. It's a two-level question actually, and the fact that they have there exists a deep military industrial complex uh, might also mean that they're in most probably there'll be equipments that would be uh, mounted on these research vessels that could have a dual purpose use, right? And the second question would be the kind of data that they gather, these research vessels gather for civilian use, might also be relevant for the military research, right? So what would be your take on this?
Yeah. So obviously, those are the key kind of details that make or break the military nature of some of these ships. So to your first part about the kind of equipment that can be boarded on some of the ships. So one of the concerns that India has had with these ships is that they can act as listening posts and communications interrupters in around our coastal borders, precisely because of the nature of communications equipment, radars mounted on some of these ships, right?
And they could be entirely different from the ones which are usually mounted on civilian or research vessels, but because a military vessel might attract more attention. uh, it makes sense for the Chinese to mount such equipment on a civilian research vessel, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think I'm a little short on evidence for this, but there is a keen possibility that some of the radars that are mounted on these comprehensive research vessels are otherwise used for military purposes. I mean, we've seen such radars of a military nature, the radio frequency of radars used in a military context being mounted on some of the artificial
Right.
islands that are developed after reclamation projects in the South China Sea, and even those projects are referred to as civilian by China, and they argue that. Any equipment that is supposedly dual use is necessary defense to be deployed on those islands so that
Right.
China can protect its civilian infrastructure, which of course
Yeah, yeah, and given the military industrial complex, there is no limitation on the Chinese to not resort to these kind of tactics.
right, the military industrial complex, dual use applications, civil military fusion, all of these come together to put a big question mark on the kind of equipment deployed in some of these civilian infrastructures. And there's a very real possibility that these ships are used likewise for such a purpose. And some of the ships also have on board with them unmanned underwater vehicles, something that I referred to earlier. The Sea Wing glider, which is very similar to the Sea Wing that the U.S. Navy uses, but developed by, say, the Shenyang Institute of Automation in China, have been found on board these ships and have even been discovered by the Indonesian Coast Guard in the waters, by Indonesia, by India, and some other littoral states, I think. And even though, again, these are UUVs, they're projected as not being of a military nature, but are only sent off in the dozens into the water to conduct a comprehensive survey of the Indian Ocean area. They've been in Bay of Bengal in very close waters to India, and the fact that they're there for very long times and ocean currents can drift them virtually anywhere means that not only do they have a capability to conduct research that supports purported military operations, but that they can do that in multiple locations without being detected, because these UUVs don't necessarily have radars or AIS systems attached to this, but their ability to conduct research comes from petrol catapulted systems, where they'll become buoyant for a little while, then they'll sink in again, and they'll keep conducting their research the entire time. So so that's again some of the military or dual purpose equipment that some of these ships are equipped with. As to your second question about what are the military uses of the
Yeah,
research,
the dual purpose research.
they conduct, what is the data that they usually collect these survey ships? It's mapping of the ocean seabed to understand marine resources, which
Right.
is a fair and square method of conducting marine research. They study maritime currents, oceanographic trends, seasonal trends, wind resource at particular points in the ocean, and and of course all of this data aids civilian research. But how this can be used for military purposes? So, gathering oceanographic data such as the maximum depth for visualizing can be used for visualizing a mine warfare or a submarine deployment scenario, right? Similarly, continued collection of marine wind data. It's very interesting when marine wind data for points in the ocean or points in the continental shelf, which just extends beyond the exclusive economic zone of a coastal state. When marine wind data for points in the continental shelf is collected, that data can be used to extrapolate how much wind resource is available in the exact areas along the coastal border as well. And this wind resource of course has key importance in the ability of these coastal states fighter jets to take off or land. And so when we when we assess and understand the wind resource that is available in the coastal areas, we can assess when are the right and the wrong times for the enemy or the target states jets to take off and land. And we make those assessments for our own air power. So China can use those assessments for its own air power and gain a significant advantage precisely because it has extrapolated the data about wind resource. Similarly, something I alluded to about submarines, right? When there is a study of chlorophyll amounts or oxygen levels in the Indian Ocean region, such a study can enable assessment of what are the requirements for submarine stealth, because submarines can be detected and their stealth operations can be jeopardized if they disturb
Right.
chlorophyll levels at some areas. So a study of the chlorophyll levels for prolonged periods of time can let the military know where exactly to deploy submarines and where to not deploy them, and those are useful for stealth operations. So some of course these are some of the aspects in which oceanographic data and trends over periods of time can be used by the military. And from the military affiliations, it can also be inferred that such research is actually used for dual use operations, which is point 3 of why Chinese vessels should concern India.
Yeah, thanks, Anushka, for this very elaborate explanation on the dual purpose research that these Chinese research vessels can carry out. And CSIS has a great report on this very thing on how the Chinese research vessels have been gathering data for military purposes, and the all the uh, mischief and notorious stuff that these Chinese research vessels do that might be of concern to a country, especially if those research vessels are conducting research along your coastline or something. And this had become an issue when with the earlier government in Sri Lanka, when the Chinese research vessel docked, when the relations between India and Sri Lanka were not doing well, and the government was led by Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Rajapaksa brothers, and but ever since the Sri Lankans went into this economic problems. Sri Lanka at least has put a moratorium on docking of foreign research vehicles, but the elections last year that we saw in Maldives and the turbulence that the India Maldives relations has been going through in the past few months, and especially pro-China stance that the Maldivian government has taken, the new Maldivian government under Muizu has taken in favor of China. It makes only sense that China is capitalizing on this relationship and sending its another research vehicle, and this is a matter of concern for India. So would you have any recommendations or anything that India must do different from what it has done in the past to actually call out China and put a break on these kind of expeditions that Chinese research vessels carry out?
Right. So I don't think there is a merit, and of course, this is my stance on this. There is merit in having China's research vessels disallowed from conducting research or making the rounds in the Indian Ocean region, because frankly the international legal provisions will not be on your side with that. But what we can do, which is not so different from what we've done in the past, is that even though New Delhi has not really launched a formal protest with Malé over the potential docking of Xiang Yang Hong 3 currently, in the coming days, it would be of merit to do so.
Right.
Because, like you said, there is a huge geopolitical angle to this. The shaky relationship between New Delhi and Malé in the past few months, in addition to Maldives President Muizzu's very evident pro-China posture, they will create hurdles for India's legitimate security interests, as they've done with Sri Lanka. And so I think there is some merit to protesting the potential military nature of such research ships and its impacts on our security. And so I think one of my, not recommendations but per se for India, but push for India to continue to do something it already has, is to make active efforts at its end to curtail the docking of research vessels in surrounding waters. And in this regard, like you said, the Sri Lankan government's decision just from early January this year to not permit any Chinese research ship to operate within its EEZ or dock at its ports for a year, it's welcome news for India. The other thing, of course, would be from a military strategic perspective to continue to understand the operational procedures and potential dual use applications of these vessels and the research that they conduct, and how this is critical to India's maritime security interests. It would also be useful for India to conduct similar research if such a research proposition can lead to significant military advantages for a long period of time.
Right. I completely agree that India needs to be a lot more firm when it comes to security, in the maritime security in its neighborhood, and needs to be a bit more firm with the littoral and island states, with in the past, which have had the history of playing the China card against India, and there is a merit in putting a red line and informing them of that there's a red line that needs not be crossed. Especially now, the thing with the Chinese that you see is that they're now the largest navy, and with the shipbuilding capability exceeding that of any nation in the world. So it makes only sense for them to produce more ships and then send them out to other in nearby regions, right? And Indian Ocean is right on the target. So I think it's India needs to be a little more firm, and I completely agree with it.
And not just the largest navy or the ship producer, it's also the country with the largest number of comprehensive research and survey ships deployed in the Indian Ocean region. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Anushka, for that fascinating discussion on Chinese research vessel. I think I'm very sure that our listeners would have benefited from this podcast, and we hope on engaging on such geopolitical stuff in the future. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a nice day.
thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.